Hi, Jeremy here, Modern Vitality. In today's video, we're talking about biohacking, and this is something that I'm a fan of. I like this biohacking approach. It'd be ridiculous for me not to like it, especially since I have such a strong background in Eastern medicine, where we could say that yogis and people doing qigong in the mountains and herbalists and these types of people were some of the first biohackers out there, really. So of course I'm interested in it. I love it. I've spent time with brain training and neurofeedback and these things. I've worked with different types of nootropics and supplements, and I'm a fan of it in general. However, there's a very important caveat that you must understand. If you're dealing with a complex chronic inflammatory condition, so something like fibromyalgia or Lyme disease, or you've had mold exposure, right? These are like some of the big ones. Chronic fatigue syndrome. We now have long haulers. There's candida. There's adrenal fatigue. There's reactivated Epstein-Barr. There's basically anything with an autoimmune component or what they call autoimmune-ish, right? So if this is you, if you're dealing with this kind of condition, there are some things you absolutely need to understand about biohacking and its place and its role in your healing journey, because otherwise, if you don't understand this, it can really mess you up. So we're going to get into this in this video. Let's get started. If you're at all familiar with my work or you've seen some of my videos, then you know that I advocate for a 4-step approach, right? There's 4 distinct stages for healing from a complex chronic health condition. If you want more details on this, I have a video about the abyss, which you can see where I lay all this out. What are the 4 stages and all that? I'll summarize really quickly for you, but the immune system is first. That's stage 1. Stage 2 is digestive system. Stage 3 is neuroadrenal. Stage 4 is blood circulation. Now, those are the 4 official stages. And when I take people through this, what's really great is that your body has an order of operations that it prefers in terms of healing. And if you kind of skip steps or you go about it wrong, you may get short-term benefits, which I've seen and my colleagues have seen, especially before I had this kind of understanding about Eastern medicine. And I know this holds true too for functional medicine and naturopath and other types of healing modalities, and not just Eastern medicine, but all of them basically are dealing with the same human body. And the human body has an order of operations. It has a way it wants to be interacted with. And when you skip steps, you can get these really interesting improvements. Wow, my symptoms are getting down. But usually after about a month or so, you'll get this backlash coming up. So for example, people can use different types of supplements or herbs to try to help their nervous system or try to help their blood circulation. But those are stages 3 and 4. And if they're still in a place where they have a lot of inflammation or biofilms or hidden pathogens or whatever's going on, right? There's an immune component, or you're having still leaky gut and food sensitivities, food allergies, all that kind of stuff. There's dysbiosis there. If that's still going on, then you haven't built a foundation. So when you go to interact with stage 3 or stage 4, you get the benefits at first, like, oh yeah, I do feel more relaxed, or oh, I've been doing more things with my blood circulation. My hands are getting warmer. However, there's a downside because you haven't dealt with the pathogens or the inflammation or whatever else is going on up top yet. So you'll wind up with this weird backlash that happens where people start to get sicker after about a month, where you feel like you just caught a cold or flu or something like that. And that may last a long time. So you want to have the right steps in the right order so that you have long-term consequences taken care of and taken into account. So there's my kind of 2 cents. I've summarized this, right? This is, of course, is a very in-depth conversation to have, but you need to have this understanding of the 4 stages as an overview. But there's also stage 5. I don't talk about stage 5 that often because we don't need to. Usually when we start to unblock the excess, the problems in stage 1, 2, 3, 4, most people start to feel like themselves again. Their body's got it, right? Your body knows how to heal. It's got systems in place. Sometimes we just have to get these blockages out of the way. And what are the blockages? Well, pathogens, biofilms, this kind of stuff, right? Food stagnation. You can have an internal, basically compost pile going on in your gut, where it should be a nice ecosystem for these happy, friendly bacteria to live, right? But it turns into just this rancid compost pile, and you get inflammation from that. There's a lot of different ways this can manifest, different types of blockages. So by clearing that out, usually the body can then start to restore itself, can start to heal itself. What I've found is that most people actually start at stage 5 with a lot of supplements and a lot of boosting and hormonal treatments. They belong there in stage 5 too. When we start looking at mitochondria, especially to the exclusion of everything else, it's all about your mitochondria. Well, it's not, right? But it is, but it's not. They're very important, but that's not the only thing going on in your body, right? You're not just a walking mitochondria. I know there's a lot of them. I know they are very important, but that doesn't mean it's the only thing. And one of the mistakes that we make when we're trying to heal And this goes for practitioners and patients. And I know this channel is really mainly for patients, for people who are struggling with these complex chronic health conditions, trying to get out from under brain fog and exhaustion, fatigue, and all these kinds of things, chronic pains, and you're trying to get out from under that. However, I do know that a lot of my colleagues watch these videos too, other health practitioners. So practitioners, don't start with supplementing and boosting, right? You need to start in an order that makes sense for the people you're working with. And one of the best gifts that we can give our patient base is to take what can be overwhelming, like all these possible potential good ideas and supplements and everything else, and actually take that and start to structure it and organize it so you can get together a plan for your patients that makes sense so they can know what their next step should be. This is so important. So colleagues, if you're watching, just take note, right? Take this model and start to incorporate it into your work. And I think you'll find a lot of your patient outcomes get a lot better. So if we start with boosting, if we start with supplementing, if we start with just the mitochondria, right, to the exclusion of everything else, we're making a mistake by looking at a complex system and trying to reduce it down to one key variable, right? This is a big mistake. Everybody makes this mistake. We're all humans. But when we're solving big problems, like trying to heal from Lyme disease or fibromyalgia or something like that, you can't afford to make this mistake because you're not aligned to reality. When we try to oversimplify a complex problem and just bring it down to one thing, oh, it's the mitochondria. Oh, all disease begins in the gut, right? Oh, it's all your nervous system. It's not all any of those things. It's all of those things in varying levels. We have to be willing to recognize the complexity of the system. So all this is to say, with biohacking, a lot of the biohacking therapies and supplements and materials, they kind of live in stage 5. And what I'll say about this, I'm going to draw a line, and I don't like to divide people, right? But I'm going to draw just a line, and we can make it a dotted line if you want, so that it's not so hard and fast. But I want to draw a little line between people who are recovering their health, meaning trying to dig yourself out of the abyss of a complex chronic health condition, and people who aren't trying to recover their health, people who have a baseline of health and they're trying to optimize, right? So we have recovery and we have optimization. And those are two different places to be physiologically in terms of what your body's going to respond to. So quick example, I use this one a lot because this is such a strong example and so many people have this experience. Exercise, right? Exercise. Okay, I have chronic fatigue. I'm always tired. Maybe I should exercise. I'm trying to regenerate my mitochondria, right? They said in the book, they said it's all about your mitochondria or whatever. I saw an article, or my friend Jenny said it's all about mitochondria, right? Kind of, right? But if you take that basis and you go, okay, I need to maximize my mitochondria. I'm too tired all the time, so I should exercise. I should push through that fatigue and I should exercise because exercise is one of the best ways to generate new mitochondria. Sure, that's true, right? That is true. However, there's a context here because if you're dealing with recovery, if you don't have an immune system that can handle exercise and tissue repair afterwards, right? Then what happens? You exercise, you push through, and you wind up with a 5-day hangover, post-exertional malaise syndrome, right? Where you exercised, and it might even be nothing strength. You maybe just walked too long, right? Or you tried to jog or whatever. You just did too much, whatever that is, and it knocks you out. You wind up with this weird hangover thing going on. You're flared up, right? It's really frustrating. And I know because so many people I've worked with, they have this process happening where the best intentions coupled with severe amounts of willpower going, listen, I'm going to push through this fatigue. This is really miserable, but I'm going to do it, right? I'm not lazy. I'm not giving up. I'm going to fight. And you wind up fighting yourself. And guess who loses that, right? You, of course. So you wind up with this blowback thing. But that's because what's happening is we're taking something like exercise is really good around stage 4, usually when we're doing more blood circulation type therapies. We're taking something like that and we're trying to do it too early, right? Exercise, especially more strenuous strength training and cardio and these kinds of things, that really does well in stage 5. People that don't have a complex chronic inflammatory condition do great with exercise, right? It looks like a panacea. It's a magic pill. If you could take the benefits of exercise, put it in a pill, and people could just take that and get all the health benefits as if they'd done a workout, you'd be a billionaire, right? It's amazing. Exercise is just ridiculously good for you. However, that doesn't mean it's good for everybody all the time. So we have to understand where you are in your healing process. You have to be able to delineate that and go, okay, I'm in recovery mode, not optimization mode. I'm somewhere between stages 1 to 4. I'm not in stage 5 yet. When you get to stage 5, by all means, go join the gym, start rock climbing, right? Do all these things and get out there and get your life back. But that's a different you than the one who's in recovery mode. It's a different person. You have a different thing going on with your system, right? You have to respect that. You have to have, it's really tricky because you have to have the patience to take your ego and all the self-talk and say, listen, I understand that I miss exercise or that it would help me and that I feel like I should do it and all this stuff. And you have to take that and just pause it and align to the reality of what happens if you do it right now. Are you going to get messed up or not, right? Is it helpful or not? Not everybody has this. But exercise is a great example because it shows what happens when we take something from one stage and we try to put it in a different stage. And there's this old saying I like, if you ask a fish to climb a tree, right, it looks like a failure. It looks ridiculous, right? Fish can't climb trees. So when you take something out of its element, right, fish in water are amazing, right? They're extremely fast. But if you ask it to climb a tree, it's immediately going to fail. Same thing for exercise or any other therapy. If you take something great, like a fish in water is perfect. It's at home, it works, right? But if you take any other therapy and you take it out of its context and try to use that on your body at the wrong time, it's just like a fish climbing a tree. You've taken something that could be great, but it's out of context, right? So this is the whole thing with a lot of these biohacking techniques, is that they are great for people who are already fairly healthy and working on optimizing their system. Right? Because a lot of this stuff requires some hormesis, which means some challenge to your body. A lot of this stuff isn't necessarily what you want to be doing when you're chronically inflamed, right? So like biohacking could have a lot of, we're looking at kind of extreme like heat or cold exposure, which is great. I love it. I'm a huge fan of it at the right time, right? So some people go, okay, I want to try this. I'm going to jump in, and they're doing ice baths and all that, but they're still really inflamed. And what's happening, if they can make it into the ice bath, is they're getting the cold exposure, but they're not getting all the benefits from it, because what that cold exposure is doing is it's going to drive all their blood into the core of the body, right? Because that's what happens when we hit the cold water, our body tries to preserve the health of the vital organs, which is one of the reasons if you're already at optimization level, if you're in stage 5, that's a great practice to do, because it's filling your organs up with more blood and it's kind of you get this nice euphoria and all these great things happen. I'm a huge fan. I love it, right? I've got plenty of videos of myself walking into snow falling on lakes and things like that. It's fun, right? It's challenging, it's difficult. And there is a health benefit to it when you're at the right stage. If you're still like chronically inflamed and you've got biofilms and pathogens and all that, what you're doing then is you're taking all this blood that's got bacteria, viruses, spirochetes, mold spores, whatever in there, right? Mycotoxins and things. And now you're going in a cold environment and your body shunts and shoves all that blood to your internal organs. So now you're basically taking those pathogens and driving more of them into your deeper areas. Not good, right? So you might get the cold will actually reduce inflammation, because cold starts to slow down our inflammatory processes, which means it's starting to handcuff your immune system so it can't get to work on these things, and simultaneously drives the pathogens in further. Not good. Right? Not in that situation, not for that person. So when you start looking at biohacking therapies, a lot of them, neurofeedback is another one. We don't usually get into neurofeedback until we're at least at stage 3, at least, so that we know that we have the biofilms, pathogens, all that is basically handled, or at least at a manageable level, no matter what it is. If you're dealing with Lyme disease or mold exposure or like chronic fatigue syndrome, most likely has a viral or some other pathogenic component, most likely. Also long haulers, obviously, right? If you're dealing with this stuff and you're still in the active inflammatory situation, it may not be the best time to do brain training and try to say, it's all in your head. You can use positive thinking and neurofeedback to just like will yourself back to health. It can help, sure. But brain training itself is a lot like exercise. In order to really get your brain humming doing these processes, you're going to be creating some inflammation in there. And you're going to need to have a healthy immune response anyway to help your brain start to wire in all those new connections. So if you don't have a healthy, happy immune response, you're going to have a hard time with the brain training. It works a lot better once you've gotten your gut sorted out. And before that, gotten all the pathogen load and the inflammatory processes dialed in. So this is just kind of the reality here. Another thing too, with a lot of the biohacking techniques is that they're new. So a lot of extracts and supplements, and basically it's a chemical pharmacy, right, of all these things. They're very interesting. They show promise, right? Very interesting, of course. However, do you want to experiment with the new things when you're trying to dig yourself out of complex chronic health condition? Not necessarily, When your body's a little more healthy and a little more robust and resilient, then you can kind of challenge it with some of the stuff that may be a little bit untested still. These are still the fringes of medicine, if you want to call it that, or human performance or optimization or whatever it is. So if something does go wrong or doesn't agree with you, you want to be coming at it from a place where you're already in stage 5 and you have some resilience, so that if you take the wrong supplement, right? If you try methylene blue, for example, and it turns out that that's not right for you, you're not damaging a body that's fragile and kind of still stuck in stage 1 or 2 with just wild inflammatory swings. You want to be able to handle that, right? Be able to absorb that if something isn't the right thing for you later when you're doing these kinds of experiments with biohacking, and not have it break you. So the best thing to do is use tried and true, proven things, older methods with history. You can look up, I've got a video about silver fox, right? You should look that up if you're interested in this topic and how to know if something's time tested and why that's important, right? But you want to use those things because they're generally going to be a lot safer. There's a lot less volatility there. So that'll help you because you're more fragile. As much as I don't like to label this and say, you're fragile, right? But you're relatively more fragile if you haven't moved through stages 1, 2, at least, and 3 and 4 ideally, right? Then you're just going to be more fragile, which means you can't take the wrong input too much. It can hurt you, right? That's why people say, oh, I'm super sensitive. I react to everything. Sometimes that's temporary and you'll outgrow it. You're very reactive because you don't have a high buffer of vitality right now. Everything's like razor edge. So if you take the wrong thing, even at a small dose, you'll feel it and you're like, and you can be laid out for days, So you got to be aware of this. You want to try to cultivate so that you're doing the right stuff, meaning less volatility, less kind of experimental things, more tried and true methods, especially if it's a medicine with a lot of history, a long history of use. Now, I have a strong background in Eastern medicine. I'm very biased towards that. I'm happy to admit my bias. I'm biased towards older things like 3,000 to 5,000 year old herbal formulas and things like that, right? Breathing techniques, practices, ancient stuff that's gone through human history, and also organizing it so we don't get overwhelmed, right? And still customizing it and making it a unique plan for your given situation. You have to do all this stuff. So I'm not giving out specific medical advice or specific formula in this video, but it's important to have a plan and have principles around that plan that meet you where you actually are. So when we start biohacking, it's tempting, okay? It's very tempting because we hear these gurus and conversations and things online. We see it in forums, there's podcasts and all that where people are talking about always the newest thing, and it's some silver bullet and it basically promises to give you superpowers. And people are using it and they're like, wow, my brain's working better, or oh, it helped my pain, or I've got so much energy now, or whatever it is. Are those people coming from the same place you are currently? And sometimes it does happen, right? Sometimes you'll have somebody who's dealing with Lyme disease or exhausted. They try something that works for them. There's always going to be outliers, right? But if you copy that and it doesn't work for you, this is why. It's out of order. Doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It may work great 6 months or 2 years or whenever from now when you're in more of a stable stage 5, right? Might be great then. Okay. But you can't always just copy whatever somebody else is doing, something that works for them. So the temptation there is you hear all that, you get excited and you go, I'm going to biohack my way out of Lyme disease. I'm going to biohack my way out of chronic fatigue syndrome. I like your attitude. I do. But what I'll tell you is point that attitude at something a little more tried and true and time tested before you start doing the more experimental stuff. And I know and I understand that the longer you've been sick, the more you're suffering and the more your mind has to open, right? You become open-minded to all kinds of stuff because mainstream medicine already had a few chances with you, right? And they didn't do it, obviously. So, that's why you're here, right? If you went to your doctor and they cured your Lyme disease or they cured your fibromyalgia, like with the Western medicine, you wouldn't be on my channel, right? So obviously if you're watching this, you've done that, it didn't work. And now your mind is open. You're like, hey, I'm open to all these alternative perspectives. And what can happen is your mind can get too open, meaning all the hype of whatever the latest silver bullet biohacking micro supplement or whatever is, that excitement is good, right? It can rally your hope up. But at the same time, if you don't organize all these things, you're going to try a few things. And if they don't work, your morale and your mojo can go down. And we need to protect that, right? We don't want hopelessness. We don't want to go anywhere near that. So one of the ways to protect that is to organize the things you try, because every time you try and fail, it kind of deducts a little bit from your mojo, right? Which I get. So we don't want to feel like we're on rock bottom, which means you can't just try random stuff. And especially I'll give you this kind of filter that I use is if something's like brand new newly developed reductionist chemical, maybe save that for later when you have more of a physical health buffer, so that you can afford to make mistakes a little bit here and there without it wrecking you. Start with stuff that's older, time tested, and organized, right? Organized in terms of a plan. That's so important. If you're dealing with a complex chronic health condition, you don't have to do it alone. If you want company, we've got a great group. It's a support group, Modern Vitality Solutions and Support. I started it and I'm in there every single day. It's free to join as a guest. We're international. We got people from all over the world, and everybody's working their way through this kind of logic and trying to get their health back, right? We're trying to recover and then optimize, not the other way around. You don't want to do it backwards. So if you care to be involved in our conversations there, if you'd like to be included, we have a vault full of videos that are interactive. You can find out where you're at in terms of different things we look at in your body and how you can formulate your plan so that you can start getting better and start getting your life back. Because I'm willing to bet if you're watching this kind of video, you're either a practitioner who's just curious about what we're doing here, which is fine. You're welcome, right? You can join our practitioner training group. That's fine. Or B, you're somebody who's trying to get their health back, right? Somebody who's actually missing out on life because of all these symptoms. So if that's you, this is probably the most important thing you're working on right now, because once you unlock this, then you can start being there for other people, having fun, being spontaneous, dancing, whatever you're into that you can't do right now because of how you feel. You need to get that back. Right? There's too many people in your life that count on you, that depend on you, and also you've got too much inside to not be able to share it, right? This is part of what we do, is get people back to where they can start to radiate out again. It's lovely. Anyhow, it's free to join as a guest, and the link, you'll find it in the description, below the video where the link would be, you'll find it. If your application looks stellar and you're going to be a great fit for our group and our community, I'll let you know as soon as I can. I keep it cozy. We do fill up. There might be a wait. Could be 2 weeks, could be 2 months. I don't know, but I try to get everybody in as soon as possible, and I go by order. So it's first come, first serve, and as spaces fill up, then we wait for somebody to go and then we get in the next person. So you'll be contacted as soon as possible. In the meantime, you might consider subscribing to this channel, like this video. Why would you do that? Well, 2 reasons. 1, you're training the algorithm. YouTube, hey, I pushed the button. I like this video. Show me more stuff like this, because healing's important to me. I don't want to just see cat videos all day, even though they're nice too, right? But you train the algorithm to work for you. And then the second thing is you're paying it forward. You're tagging this video, liking it, subscribing, whatever you do to interact like this, give it a thumbs up or whatever. That'll help YouTube show this video to more people who are like you. So you're helping others find this too. So I appreciate that. I hope this video helps you. Let's get you feeling better. Cheers.